It was a quiet Friday evening when Adam, a seasoned pizza delivery driver, received an order for a large pepperoni pizza and a 2-liter soda. The address was for a secluded house on the outskirts of town, a place he hadn't been to before. The phone call was peculiar. The woman who placed the order had a strange, almost too calm voice, and she requested that Adam deliver the pizza at exactly 9:15 p.m. He shrugged it off as another eccentric customer. When Adam arrived at the address, the house appeared to be abandoned. There were no cars in the driveway, and the windows were dark. He rang the doorbell multiple times, but there was no answer. As he turned to leave, he heard a faint voice call his name. "Adam." It whispered from behind him. He spun around and saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was the woman from the phone call, but something was off about her. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, and her skin was unnaturally pale. She invited him in without saying a word. Adam hesitated but entered, his gut telling him something was wrong. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The walls were bare, and the air was thick with dust. The woman led him to a dimly lit room at the back of the house, where a large, old-fashioned mirror hung on the wall. She stood in front of it, staring at her reflection, as Adam nervously set the pizza on the table. Suddenly, she turned toward him, her face twisted in a grotesque expression. "You're not supposed to leave," she said in a chilling tone. Adam backed away, his heart racing, but the door slammed shut behind him. He was trapped. The woman moved toward him, slowly at first, then faster, as if she was being pulled by something unseen. Before he could react, the mirror flickered, and the reflection of the woman changed. It was no longer her face but the face of a long-dead figure with hollow, dark eyes. Adam was frozen in place, unable to move. The last thing he remembered was the woman's voice whispering his name again, louder this time, just before the room went black. The next morning, a local news story reported that Adam had gone missing. His last known whereabouts? The house on the outskirts of town. Police investigated the area but found nothing. No house, no pizza delivery. Just an empty lot where the house once stood. To this day, no one has ever seen Adam again. Jessica was new to the pizza delivery business. It had been a few weeks since she started working at the local pizzeria, and she was getting the hang of the late-night shifts. One particularly stormy night, she received an order for 2 large pizzas and some garlic bread. The address was for a mansion on the edge of town, something about it felt off. But the tip was too good to pass up, so she accepted the order. When Jessica arrived at the mansion, she could barely make out its outline in the thick fog that surrounded the area. The windows were dark, and the door was slightly ajar. She rang the doorbell and waited. No response. After a few moments, the door creaked open, and she stepped inside. The air was damp and smelled faintly of mildew. Jessica called out, "Pizza delivery," but there was no answer. She stepped further into the house, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. She spun around, trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to rise in her chest as she heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. Jessica turned and started walking toward the sound, calling out again, but the footsteps stopped abruptly. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a man in a dark suit, his face obscured by shadows. He didn't speak. He simply pointed down the hallway and gestured for Jessica to follow him. Trembling, she followed, hoping to find the person who had ordered the pizza. As they walked, the atmosphere grew colder, the air thick with a sense of dread. The man led her to a large, dimly lit room at the back of the mansion. He didn't speak a word as he motioned for her to place the pizza on the table. Jessica did, but before she could turn to leave, she felt a sharp pain in her back. She spun around, but the man was gone. It wasn't until later that Jessica realized something horrifying. Her phone had been ringing the entire time she was inside the mansion. She checked the call history, 32 missed calls. The strange part? The calls were all from the number she had just dialed to confirm the order. The mansion was empty when the authorities arrived. No one had ever ordered pizza from that number, and the house had been abandoned for years. To this day, Jessica has no explanation for what happened, but she refuses to deliver to that address ever again. Mark had worked as a pizza delivery driver for years, and he had seen his fair share of odd deliveries. But nothing could prepare him for the night he would encounter the most terrifying experience of his life. It was a quiet, chilly evening when Mark received an order for a single cheese pizza. The address was for a house deep in the woods, miles away from any other homes. The GPS led him down a winding, narrow road that seemed to get darker the further he went. He was about to turn around when he saw the house, a decrepit old structure with broken windows and a collapsed porch. Mark knocked on the door, but no one answered. He knocked again, then heard a faint voice from inside. "Come in. I'm waiting." The voice was soft, almost like a whisper. Something about it made Mark uneasy, but he opened the door anyway. Inside, the house was unsettlingly still. The air was thick with the smell of decay. He called out, "Pizza delivery," but no one replied. He took a few steps inside, scanning the dimly lit room. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the floor creaked beneath his feet. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind him. Mark spun around, his heart racing. He could hear breathing, deep and heavy, coming from the shadows. He started to back toward the door, but it was locked. The room seemed to close in around him, and the whispering voice grew louder. "Don't leave," it said, now much clearer. "You're already here. You belong to me now." Mark turned to run, but as he reached the door, it vanished. He was no longer in the house. Instead, he found himself standing in a foggy, unfamiliar place. The sound of whispers surrounded him, and he realized he was trapped in a twisted version of reality. The next day, Mark's car was found abandoned at the edge of the woods. The pizza was still in the back seat, uneaten, but there was no sign of Mark anywhere. No one has seen him since, and the house he visited has vanished without a trace. Local authorities believe the place never existed in the first place.